Thanks for reminding me.
My
Okay.
son changed my Zoom name, so it's The Mandalorian season 2 comes out today.
Oh, thanks for the reminder.
Cara Doom is now Cara Zoom.
Yeah. Okay. Well, oh, good. We're getting some other.
Hey, Grace.
Hi, Grace.
Hi, everyone. Good morning.
Hi. Oh, we're super excited that you could join us. This will be really great.
Me too.
Because we did have at least one person. I know Tamron had trouble getting in, but eventually got in. But Kurt had hoped to participate in the last workshop, and the link just was not cooperating. So I think that for us to reflect on how powerful that workshop was, but also to sort of fill Kurt in and kind of at least, bring him into that experience through our experience would be really great. And hi, Andrew.
Morning.
Good morning. Okay, we'll open up the session.
So, should we try to summarize as much as we can for Kurt? I mean, just use this again. The Unlearning Hour is a wonderful opportunity to connect with people that were there and who were not there, and like to kind of keep the kind of flattening out of the project, not expecting knowledge to be equally kind of distributed in this way. So we learn from each other. So I don't know. I think we should all probably share some reflections or descriptions of what we did, not leave it to Grace to to remind us. So I mean, my main recollection was the question of embodiment and the question of human and non-human interaction. And I think that what really stayed with me was the exercise we did towards the end of the session, where we went into breakout rooms and we had to, in our groups, one person was the human and everyone was a non-human animal or entity who kind of spoke to the human about kind of what the human kind of had done to us or how we related to the human, and kind of asked the human to respond to us in some way and engage with us. So yeah, and that was very powerful. And I think for both the human actor as well as for the non-human entities too. I think it's hard. One thing I did recognize in this session was it was hard to communicate when we went back into the main group exactly kind of what happened sufficiently. I mean, it was because it was quite powerful within the groups itself. That was one thing that just really stayed with me from last week.
We forgot about that. Thank you, Grace, for
yeah. Visualize your reactions.
I could share. With Kurt, another activity that we did was what we call the Mount Rushmore activity, which is really powerful, but also really heavy activity that's based off of a blog that Daniel wrote. I don't know I think you were all sent it, so I don't know, maybe you did get a chance to read the blog or maybe not. But the activity is kind of embodying Mount Rushmore before and after it was carved into what we now, know it as. And using Trump's recent speech and some words that he spoke about 4 American giants, and kind of feeling all of this in your body versus trying to rationalize it and think about it. And for me, this is always a really powerful activity. It was the first time I actually participated in it during this workshop. And I think for me, it shows the power of embodiment exercises, because you really, versus rationalizing a conflict, feel it. You can't avoid feeling that heaviness, that conflict within your being. So I think for me, that was a really impactful moment when we talk about embodying epistemic justice. It's really about, we're humans, we can't leave the mind aside, but it's how do we bring our other senses, other parts of our being into these experiences when we explore these hard questions. And something that, I think your name is Richard. It says Karazu. Is it Richard?
It's Richard.
What's your name again? It
That's
is
me.
Richard.
I was just saying, yeah, it's my son made me a different name. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Yeah. I was like, wait, am I wrong? But I think something you already mentioned is it's hard to embody and explain what happens when you're embodying. We're so used to being disconnected from our bodies. But I think that was also, although it felt hard to express something powerful that came out, is how hard it is to really genuinely express with our bodies, and then turn that into words. So I think that's also an important point. Also, my computer's telling me my internet connection is unstable. I am at my house today, which is always hard. So if I cut out, that's why.
Yeah, maybe just following up on sorry on Grace's comments. It was very evident for me that everyone seemed to be uncomfortable. Like it was not necessarily not eager to do it, but just sort of like not used to it. Um, and it took a little while to sort of feel like it's okay to like move around, and stuff like that. So it was really a good reminder of how little we move, right? Period. And then two, how little we explore that idea of like, so you were talking about like embodying epistemologies and things like that, but the idea of the body as a source of knowledge, it really does take some sort of reframing, from my perspective, and I thought Richard's example, like I love the idea, the story about becoming the donkey, but it was very interesting that you kept pulling the narratives into it, like from known myths and things like that in order to embody it. Everybody approached it from different angles, but it was interesting, like how that's our go-to place, like that's how we think, and so it's we try to approach the exercise from a place that we're familiar with, but the invitation was actually to step outside of that comfort zone entirely, and do something totally different. So
Yeah, I registered that as I guess as a problem for me in the session, this sense of I was invited to do, to think about embodiment in this ways. And I think others in our group, I remember Tamara and you talking about kind of concern about why did I choose the ocean? Like, what was that for? But mine felt a little calculated, and mainly because I think that, I love donkeys. I think about donkeys a lot, and I think about donkeys a lot because of the work that I've done in the past, and because of Apuleius and his work being very kind of formative for me, and also Apuleius, he's famous for writing this novel, but he was also denigrated as not being a real philosopher. And so there's this and he's from North Africa, and there's this kind of already a kind of kernel of kind of Eurocentric kind of bias that's happening within his work. And even people talking about he's like the philosophizing donkey, like a kind of a racist kind of view of describing him. And so, there's a lot of depth in that story and in that author that even though I've left that discipline behind, I still hold on to him. And I also there's also a great story with him, which is in antiquity and beyond, people thought that it was an autobiographical story about him being turned into a donkey. And he was accused of magic and put on trial for magic. And so there's this real kind of slippage between a fictional biography and an authorial biography. And so there's something there that's like, what we were doing was a fictionalizing. And so I couldn't you know, it was all bound up together, I guess, the example and the method that we were doing with that project. But, you know, like Tamara, I wish I'd kind of just, something had happened where it came from somewhere else, you know, or I couldn't explain where it came from, but I could, you know, so that's why I felt a little bit kind of too kind of exacting about it. Oh yeah, Apuleius, I'll write it down, Kurt. Yeah, sorry.
So maybe Tamara, you can share from your perspective, and then Andrew, you had a really powerful, profound statement towards the end of the session that kind of left me, you know, kind of thinking about that for the rest of the week. So maybe both of y'all can share, you know.
Sure. I think I was trying to like find something like Richard had, you know, like something I could like grab onto that would drive like how I talked about embodying this other thing. And so I felt like I was struggling through the whole thing. Like first I struggled with trying to figure out what to be. And then as I was describing it, I felt really untethered and like I just felt like I wasn't sure how to do, you know, where to like enter into, and then how to relate it to the human experience of the ocean. And so yeah, I guess because I didn't have anything concrete like in my mind to like use as a thread even, I just, yeah, felt kind of like I was a little all over the place. And then I found it really challenging to think about how to take all of that, like you're, I think, saying, Grace, and put it into like an expression, a bodily expression that was like one, because I think we were originally told to like have a pose or something, and it was hard to do a single pose, you know, we all kind of moved, I think, right? So that, yeah, that was a real challenge.
And just my two main things were, happy to recount what I said last week. In that, during that Council of Beings activity where we were all asked to be a living thing, I chose the elephant. And just thinking about what came to mind was like living in the herd group, but then the humans are there either to protect, right, the people that stop the poachers or the poachers themselves. And what came to mind when I was thinking about that was like we already have teeth and have functional things that do what ivory does for the elephant, right? That we don't need it, but that we still want it. So we still crave what other beings have. And I think I also gave the example of like trees and cutting down for wood, right? And especially when trees are endangered, like, you know, we have mahogany and redwood and all these really majestic plants even, right? We can think about how amazing the natural world is, that there are things that are that tall and that old. And the other thing that has stayed with me till now is this kind of idea of using our bodily movements. And, you know, we were asked to like make these sounds to like release tension and like, and how allow our thoughts to kind of escape us. And I think that that's helpful. I mean, definitely seeing things like yoga, the gym, you know, thinking about how we can like excise like bad energies, if that makes sense, through like movement. And, you know, sometimes you just need to like let it all out with a yell or something, right? So I think that that's what kind of stayed with me.
Maybe on that point, actually on 2 points as I kind of looked through the notes, but it was very interesting to me that kind of what Andrew was saying about like combining a sound with the bodily movement at the beginning, that many of the sounds were hushed, right? Like they were like whooshing sounds, but they were hushed, right? Like they were whispers, right? And people were saying, I'll go next, like they're taking turns, you know, and that's why I felt compelled to just like jump in and do like a really loud sound, you know, and a broad movement. Exactly what Andrew is saying, right? That it is cathartic, you know, and that often when we think about body movements, our minds go to this idea of like yoga or something which is like mindful and quiet and still, but there is another flip side to that, right? Which is like dancing and expressing and being loud, as celebratory, that I think also can complement, like that sort of thinking. The other thing, Andrew, is like in that community of beings, or that council of beings, the use of the first person was really powerful,
Yeah.
because we often are describing something or saying, if I were a tree, this is what I would say, like we're framing it in that distance sort of perspective. So assuming the first voice to talk to the human, the first person voice to talk to the human, I thought was really powerful. And then maybe last comment, going to what Cameron said, um, it really underscores, this sort of like feeling of like being untethered and not knowing what to do, and like just kind of feeling like, whoa, this is like totally out of my understanding zone. I think it really underscores what we've said on multiple occasions, that one time is not enough, right? That we need to continue rehearsing and reiterating, these types of experiences, and kind of become more comfortable in them, but that a single conversation about a difficult topic or a single experience isn't enough. Like it has to build on something. So for me, I had a really different experience. It was similar and different than a previous experience, right? So in a previous experience, it was a really incredible thing. But I was in South Texas near Lake Amistad, and it's Seminole Canyon. It's a lake that was dammed, and so it flooded, like a lot of these pictographs, that people made. They're some of the oldest pictographs, and they're absolutely stunning, right? And in exploring the site, we happened upon this group that had actually brought like a shaman to do like a drumming, like a guided drumming vision sort of thing. I'd never done anything like that in my life. And so we were supposed to find like a spirit animal, and then he guides you on this sort of tour, and the drums sort of mark the beats of like when you're going into it, when you're coming out of it, and things like that. And I remember that I was trying to pick like a really cool spirit animal, like for the first time thinking like, what's my spirit animal? And this hummingbird kept like, it was like a fly, and I kept like swatting this little thing away, looking for my spirit animal. And then I realized, oh my God, that is, it's like presenting itself to me. And here I am like swatting it away, looking for the other thing. So this time I was trying again to think of something that I could add to the conversation, like wind, water, something like that. Maybe embodying things as beings, things that in Western perspective we often consider not to be like sentient beings. So I was really trying to focus there, and there again it was the freaking hummingbird, So it just presented itself, and this time it was easy for me to say, okay, I'll just go with the flow. Like I'm not going to fight it. So that idea of like reiterating and becoming more comfortable with different things, I think is it's important, and it's important in our methodologies. It's important when we talk about topics of like diversity, where it can't just be a one-off conversation. So
Thank you for sharing that experience. That's really beautiful. And I think it's cool to see how your experience in these workshop spaces has mimicked that experience you had in that space. Hearing these conversations reminded me of, I guess, a conflict that I want to share when I do this activity, that I often feel. So I mean, one of the central points of this activity is to, in a way, give weight to the stories and the ways of knowing and being of other beings, whose ways of knowing and being are often silent, marginalized, pushed aside. And A question that was brought up in another workshop recently, which I think is a really good question, is how do we tell stories about these beings without telling stories for these beings? Which I think is really hard because, I think our job as humans, or the way that I view this, is bearing witness and trying to communicate, because we do have to translate it into our language in some ways if we're going to be the bearers of these stories. But when you bring into these power dynamics, it's like, as I think many of you have mentioned in different ways, we can't really know what the elephant feels, what the donkey feels. We're using everything comes from our subjective experience. So I think it's something that I always struggle with. I think it's important that these stories are told. But then I think it's also important that we have in mind that we can't really know what their truth is, what their ways of knowing and being are, but that telling their stories is at least a way to bear witness to what they're living through, and to stop viewing our world as the only world, to bring in this idea of the pluriverse once more, that there are millions of other ways to see the world, to experience the world, to be in the world. And I think for me, the strength of this activity is acknowledging that there's not just this one human way, which I've heard from a lot of you in different ways, which is exciting. But again, with this conflict of kind of also remembering what Richard said our first, I think, workshop, where we were reading someone's words back to them. It's like, what are those power dynamics of, you don't actually have a voice. I'm speaking for you. They might be your words how I interpret them, but it's how I interpret them. Yeah. So those were interesting connections I've started to see.
I also felt like back to what Michelle said about the first person and the I, like as a kind of meeting point of those worlds, especially using language in order to kind of, articulate those worlds, that, you don't kind of know how it's going to feel until you do it. Like, you don't really know how that process of embodiment will, affect you. And so I think that those meeting points are really, again, I think it's very important, as you say, Grace, to like realize that there's a kind of anthropomorphism that is part of the kind of endangering of the natural world. But at the same time, I think maybe it is a kind of letting go of certain power dynamics. If you can at least see yourself in these worlds. I was just sharing in the chat this film. It's very short. It's like 2 minutes long. And maybe I'll just play it because it's really the meeting point. It's like, because it's human worlds. It's by Ho Chunk artist, filmmaker Sky Hapinka, and it's 2 minutes long, and it has Michelle's hummingbird in it. Let me share my screen. Can you all see? That was a hummingbird, right?
It makes me think of one of my favorite books is Michel Rouftrio's Silencing the Past,
Mm.
and he talks about how uh, like for example the news or contemporary media, they string together like a series of facts, right? But that as they're strung together, they become sort of like trivialized, or decontextualized, so that they lose their significance. So I love that juxtaposition of like just these disarticulated facts, with the continuity and the integrity and the consistency of the hummingbird doing
Yeah.
its thing, but also unbothered, like none of this affects the hummingbird. So loved it.
I think watching it for that time, I didn't realize that it was. I think the first time I watched it, I was reading and didn't focus on the hummingbird. But this time, because I was trying to work out, is it a hummingbird? I was kind of like looking at the hummingbird, So, and the only way I could really be sure it was a hummingbird was the way it flapped its wings. I know that because of the size, the hummingbird's wings are very different. Like the speed in which they flap them must be anyway. So, and also what you were saying as well, like the randomness, it seemed like the facts were only being shown for as long as the hummingbird was there. So yeah, anyway.
Michelle, what you just said made me visualize a world in which on the news it was like just a hummingbird. It's like war in this country, and then a hummingbird drinking at a bird feeder. And what a beautiful world that would be.
And like an exchange, like 2 minute, like stick with this kind of way. Oh,
Yeah, like this is also happening. This is also important, and I think it is cool to see all these, on another note, all these different facts from the human world. And again, the continuity of the hummingbird just still being there. And how in a way they're completely disconnected, and then in some ways they're not, right? I think that was also interesting because it does seem maybe in that example in the video, it was very disconnected, the facts that were there and the hummingbird. But I can also envision a future video where it's like at the end of, maybe the facts are more like environmental facts, and at the end the hummingbird disappears. And maybe I'm like a little dark right now because I don't know if y'all heard that Trump is trying to take protections away from the Tongass forest, Alaska, which is one of the like last intact temperate rainforests in North America. So I think right now I'm like an environmental doomsday in my head. So forgive me if I'm a little dark. But I think it is interesting how in some ways our world is so disconnected, but also how we have such a disproportionate impact in what we do. But also, Richard, that was a beautiful video. Thank you for sharing.
Grace, can you, we hear these things. I mean, we're sitting here in the heartland of these issues, but where you are, if you're willing, if there's any kind of news items about it that you're looking at that you want to share with us, that kind of gets us maybe to the state of urgency that you just expressed there, I think that would be great, because I think there is a kind of barrage of which fire to put out first, and so I think hearing someone describe that it's affecting you in a way that makes you change your perspective on the world because of this, a specific outrage. I think that I'd like to know more about that from you, and your way into that, because I think that that's another way for us to channel, I guess, these some so-called environmental damages is through emotional response.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting. I don't have any personal connection to Tongass in any way. I think I'm just a really sensitive person. But yeah, it really, I think for me, it's thinking about, and this is also why I love this activity, but all the non-human beings, whose lives do matter, whose lives are very important to our lives also. It shouldn't be the main priority, but you know, it's like our world also needs this forest. But what you reminded me of is I saw a really beautiful video this morning. That Michelle, were you in the last storytelling webinar we did on Wednesday?
Missed it. I missed that one, but I do have
Oh, it's
something to
okay.
say about it later after you do this. But yeah, I was so sad that I couldn't attend.
No, it's okay. I just thought I saw your name maybe, but maybe it was a previous one. But actually, an alumni of our program, their name is Bronte Velez. I recommend their work fully. They're an amazing, amazing person. But they create these videos that are based on what they call a Black feminist prophetic attention. And they also do rituals with this practice, but basically it's speaking as if the world that you want already is. And it kind of also is based in Harriet Tubman's quote, "My people are free." So it's kind of also this, like, you know, when Harriet Tubman said that her people were not free, but it's this prophetic, like, my people are free because I say my people are free, and then I let that guide me. So this video that I want to share with you all, which I can just put it in the the
Do
chat.
you want me to play it, Grace? If you put it in the chat, do you want me to play it? Just because your connection's a bit patchy, I can do that.
Oh, that's real. No, thank you for yeah. Let me find the video really quick. I shared it on mine. It's an Insta video.
So
But
maybe Grace, while you find the video, I'll kind of make a couple of comments. One is the music in the video that Richard just played. Also plays a role, right? Like a really big role in terms of like it's kind of like this happy or kind of mind numbing, or I don't know. So when you mentioned the thing about, you know, this barrage of things that we don't know what to put out first, and then the music sort of alleviating that urgency somehow, or like, you know, it's a little bit mind numbing, and I feel like we're kind of in that space where just so many things are happening that at some point uh, I don't know, like I feel like sometimes I disconnect, you know, because I just can't keep up with it, you know. And then the other thing I wanted to say, going back to the storytelling, because we are going to have a series of storytelling workshops in the spring. So we continue the workshops with Pachaysana, but there'll be the storytelling workshops. And one of the things that we kind of have in our mission statement, you know, for Kachawi Daikuna, and that I try to incorporate into my classroom methods, right, is exactly that challenge that Grace presented to us. One is, you know, the idea of how do we not talk about and talk for, right, someone, but engage with them, yeah? And I think that when we start getting into the details of like the how, right, it points us to the methods of, we can say, it would be a good idea to engage, or this, you know, this is where our classes need to go, but to really get into the details of how we do that, you know, in our classrooms, I think helps us to sort of like overcome that conundrum, right, of speaking for, talking about, you know, like that type of thing. So I'll just open it up. I have some ideas, but, you know, I'll just open it up for discussion. And it looks like Kurt has something in the chat. Um, let's see.
I'll just, so while we, you know, we can, maybe Kurt will want to bring that verbally at some point, but let's play the video that Grace sent us, and then we'll move on to that. I mean, I think what I'm already realizing here is the kind of vulnerability is, you know, I kind of asked Grace to to go deeper into her, and then she shared something. So Kurt, maybe there's some way or mechanism to share what you want to bring to us, not necessarily a video, but like some other mechanism. So maybe while I'll play the video, and you can think about how you'd like to bring that topic to our kind of conversation.
Haida, and Tsimshian peoples.
Sorry, I
As
don't know
Turtle
if I have to go to the
Islands.
beginning of it now. Just refresh.
Instagram's hard.
Yeah, I don't know.
Creator, we give thanks for the Tongass, the unceded lands of the Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian peoples. As Turtle Island's largest forest and the Earth's largest remaining temperate rainforest is put at risk for extraction, we humbly call upon the benevolent spirits of this place to guide us toward right action. May the old growth elders, western red cedar, yellow cedar, Sitka spruce, mountain hemlock, shore pine, eagle, salmon, bear, and wolf remind us that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That the Tongass is critical for all of our survival. We won't permit the desecration of this ancestral forest. We declare the Tongass isn't going anywhere. The Tongass will remain. The Tongass will remain. The Tongass is protected. So be it. See.
Thank you for sharing that, Richard. I appreciate it.
No, thanks for sharing that, Grace.
Yeah.
You shared.
At the end, well, thanks for sharing. But at the end, that's where you kind of heard this idea of prophetic practice of the Tongass is protected, which is a new practice to me, but I think it's really powerful to kind of live in this world where, you know, dreams are reality rather than these doubts. I think especially right now, I know we're all, you know, it's a hard time to be hopeful. So I think, you know, saying things like, I won't get into the election. I had an example that was election based.
Well, one way to do that, Grace, one way to do that with the election, actually, and it's a rather kind of aggressive Facebook post that I reposted recently, but which basically said, to people who are supporting Trump and being kind of denigrating others, right? That there will be a time when you're not in power, when you're not, you know, it might be this week, it might be in 4 years' time, but there will be a time. And you've got to think about how you are relating to your families and to other people at this moment as you kind of bring out this kind of violent language and, you know, and so it's kind of it's looking to that future that, you know, obviously some people want it to be earlier than later, but it is kind of saying that there will be a time after this where you'll have to look at yourself and how you acted at this moment. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
I hate to be like gloom and doom, but as we talk about powerful methods, we always have to be aware that they can cut both ways, right?
What do you mean? Sorry.
What I mean is that, you know, like as we think about like the climate of this country, you know, right now, the political climate, that we have people on the far right using similar rhetoric of saying it is, right? Like as if it's a reality. And so, and we've seen this before in history, right? Like where really creative, innovative, revolutionary ideas or methods have been co-opted and redeployed, you know, for the complete opposite purposes, you know. So it's just sort of, I hate to say it, you know, but I think that when we talk about powerful methodologies, you know, and we know as academics, as authors, as performers, you know, that often you put something out there and once it's out there you have no control of how it's used or where it goes or you know how people interpret it and stuff like that. So I always think about George Lipset's Carrefour dangereux, you know, he says in the Creole, dangerous crossroads, you know, like where it's a moment of opportunity and potential and it's also extremely dangerous, you know, any act of creativity, you know. Yeah. So sorry, but I had to kind of bring that in just as like, wow, we gotta have this in the back of our minds as we think through these ideas, you know. Mhm.
So Kurt, did you want to talk? Just, I mean, again, we can save also this for another session if you want to kind of prepare us later. I mean, whatever you feel like.
I think I'd like to save it for a little bit.
You're going to save it?
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good.
Say a little bit. Thanks.
Okay.
But it's powerful, Kurt, and at some point I really hope that you share your experience, kind of coming into this discussion, coming into some of the classes that we've been doing together and the workshops and things like that, and what effect those have had kind of on your feeling, thinking about the world.
Here's all part of the same thing, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I hadn't been going through this, I wouldn't be with you guys right now. So,
That's good. So we have about 15 minutes left, and I wouldn't mind. While I have you gathered here, I could do with your help with something, and it's very relevant to what we're talking about. And so I think I've shared with this group before a project that I'm part of at the Columbus Printed Arts, which is a reading room that is focused on indigenous languages, and it is. I'll share the as I talk. I'll just share and I'll share the link as well. This is a project called "Be Courageous Language Teachers Reading Room," and the guest curator is a Samoan artist, Leolia Shragi, and Sebastian Kafukeo Aliste, our artist in residence, will actually be part of this library beginning in November. And the library is to bring together books on indigenous language and philosophies and knowledges and poetry and art, but also to create a print based on a language phrase that will then be kind of distributed, and then we'll put together in a book when we get all the language phrases together. Now, what I would want your help with is Leoli sent me two possibilities for they identify as their language phrase. And so this is in the Samoan language, and I have already sent my kind of response to them, but I immediately had a certain response to one of the phrases, and then I immediately kind of straight after I'd thought about it, I then went to the other one. So I kind of, I'd like to just share the two phrases with you. I'll just share their email, so that you can see some of the kind of framing of the two phrases. And then maybe we could just, either have a discussion or a vote or anything about which of the phrases. And this would be like a print that would have the phrase on it with certain kind of design in the Samoan language. I don't think there'd be any English on there. It would just be in the Samoan language, but we have English translations here, so you can see. So I'll leave them up, and maybe, while they're up, we could just start discussing them as you see them. So I'm just going to pull up my email. Okay. So can you see the two phrases? So I don't know how to pronounce Samoan, but maybe I'll just read it. So Tatu muaseu I le alualu ai muli I le moana. So that's the first one. And then the second one is Paia lava tio ai le tio tala le lava.
I think they're both very powerful. I can just share my first reaction, which is I really love the idea of healing expressed in the second one. this idea of returning to a pre-colonial, I think it was pre-colonial, yeah, pre-colonial prayer, in order to, also heal what we're, or I should say what they are going through right now. I think they're both powerful, but for me, from what I understand of the purpose of the project, that is the one that calls my attention.
That's interesting, Grace. As I wrote to Leoli, I initially liked the first one because of, we're in Columbus, we're landlocked, and that kind of the shallows before going into the great ocean felt very appropriate for us here. But then with the second one, for some reason, it was the word turning. So the turning of the bird, and from the sacred or the holy to the good, I just found that very, very kind of powerful. And also, as you said, the pre-colonial prayer and the fact that there's a genealogy through their mother, reminding them. I think so. I kind of pivoted from the first to the second in my thinking.
I really like the second one a lot too, and the first one reminds me. That it's kind of a common turn of phrase even in the States. Like just the other day I read about somebody who is a beginning musician venturing out into the deep end of the pool. And so that has a lot in common. That's kind of more, I don't know, universal is not the right word, but
recognizable, maybe.
Recognizable, yeah. But the second one, really, I don't know, that one really affected me.
I'm actually really struck by both of them, but I'm struck by how they resonate with something that I've heard in Andean context. So there's both of them there. So I don't know, Richard, can I share my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So everybody's got the phrases. Don't forget them.
I can put them in the chat too. Yeah, let me do that.
Okay, great. Here, I'll keep them here in the chat. Okay.
You have permission. You can share your screen, right? Yeah, good.
Yeah, let me click this out. Okay, hang on, cancel. Okay, there we go. So I've heard, so relating to the second one, right? I've heard from people like Katsakachiwango, right? And also the other Yachaks, shamans, right? During rituals that they'll repeat Aripak Churu, right? And Aripak Churu means spiral of good, right? And so this idea in that last phrase, the second one, right, where it says, it is really good, or it is good, that reiteration of it is good appears over and over again in sort of like festival ritual contexts, as what people say along with the movements that they make, during like a performance. It could be just a walking, it could be dancing, it could be different things like that. So I was just struck by the statement, it is good, and how it appears in the concept of the spiral. And then for the first one, I'll just kind of project this figure, right? And this one came out of some research that I had done in the community of La Calera. They had invited me to videotape a festival that they were having. And Taita Alfonso Maigua is the Yachak, I think he's passed away now, of that community. And he we filmed it, and then we showed the video with the whole community there, and he interrupted the video and he said, these young people, they're dancing in a completely disorganized, acculturated way. This is like they're invested in this idea of multiculturalism or something, and they think that means whatever, And he said, it's not whatever. This dance is not about whatever. And he proceeded to trace the form of the dance and give it significance. And what he described, right, and what he traced on the chalkboard was this. And he said, it's people coming from their individual paths, on a meandering sort of road, and then finding each other as community and turning in one direction, turning in the other as a whirlpool, gaining strength as community, that creates a new river and impels them, like isn't impel like propels them forward, again in this and their individual paths, but with this strength that they gain from community. So that was what came to me from the first one, that there's the depth, there's the shallows, there's the individual, there's the collective. So I don't know if that informs at all the discussion. Maybe we can put the statements back up. Oh, no, we have them in the chat. Okay, good, good. Thank you.
I was just thinking about it like as a poster, that, I mean, this doesn't necessarily have to do with the content, right? But I think visually the text in that second one, and maybe it's just because it's in these 3 lines, and when it's spoken, it's not necessarily like, it looks like a poem kind of. But the repetition of and the pacing of it is really beautiful. And I could see that kind of translating into a visual, like it'll, even though it'll be text, it will still be this visual representation as a poster. I think could be just like visually, compelling.
I think that's right, Tamrin, with their work. So Leoli also creates kind of neon phrasing, and I think that the first one resembles maybe more like the phrasing that they have used before, but the second one feels like even a kind of new departure for them that would really fit in the poster print kind of style. Thank you, everyone, for. I will report. As I said, I sent Leoli my immediate response, but I said I want both. So, and I actually was worried when I said I want both. But anyway, I actually was thinking what would both mean together. But I also think making this decision is important. But I'll circle back to them and tell them that we had this discussion and say a little bit about our group, so they know it comes from an informed place as much as from a kind of self-selecting group as well.
And maybe one more thing, Richard, is I'm as I read the chat and as we weigh in, I like the second one a lot too, but one of the concepts there has to do with the turn, right? So the turns, right? And in some of the work that I do with music and also even like ritual dance and stuff, like for example, Grace, I don't know if you've probably danced the San Juanito, but as we're dancing in one direction, people will call the tikray or the half turn, right? And somebody will call it and the group will follow and the musicians will follow, so it kind of happens very organically, and it usually marks like a point of like epiphany or change or something in the person, and the group turns and supports, right? And that is really interesting how it relates to this pattern that we see all throughout poetry, Quechua poetry, Quichua poetry, music, everything, right? Which is this idea of the chiasmus, and that structure that says everything is packed in the middle, right? It's at that moment of the turn that everything, that's the important thing. And often, sometimes, even like in the chiastic pattern, which is A, B, B, A, like it's a mirror image type pattern, right? The turning point is implicit, like it's not even written. So the turning point would be like the C, right? Like so it'd be A, B, and then some, or maybe like the A, B together, C, whatever that is, whatever you call it, and then B, A, the inversion. But often that precise moment of the most importance isn't even written in there, But that idea of the turn that they mentioned here as part of that dynamic of what is good, I think is there's like so much packed into that statement,
I love that. It's funny because I interpreted the birds as a really big part of the turn, and this is not any knowledge with Samoan culture, but the idea of birds also has connections between worlds, like these turning between worlds of the sky world, the kingfisher, the water world, and also vulture turning from life to death. So I think there's a lot of different interpretations that are all really beautiful and all have this this healing and this goodness, these kind of implications that I think is really powerful.
Yeah. Well, there we are. The end of our hour. Who will tell the story of these hours that we spend together?
Thank you, Richard. Thanks everybody. So I will hang on just a second before we lose this. I want to save the chat. So then I will circulate the chat and the recording as, once it becomes available. I usually send it out. So yeah.
Okay.
Happy Halloween, everybody.
Yeah.
Coming up.
And have a great weekend, a safe weekend, and yeah. Anything else, Richard?
I don't think so. Wait, next week, is it another one or is it a workshop? I can't remember off the top of my head.
So let's
It's a workshop.
It's a workshop.
actually no. So next weekend, nope. So next week we have another Unlearning hour, just a discussion, and then on the 13th is the third Epistemic Justice week workshop.
Okay.
So I'll send out a reminder just for everybody to sort of have that on their calendars and stuff like that. I think that we have fixed the link, for the workshops. I really apologize. I originate this link, so it's no problem. But the other one is originated by the Center for Latin American Studies, and twice we've had problems. So Megan was on top of it and trying to fix it. So hopefully everybody will have easy access. If not, we found the trick with Tamron, like just keep trying it and see if you can get in. But it took multiple attempts last time. So.
Well, given that we do have an extra week, then I mean, Kurt, if you want to share anything that we can look at ahead of time, or anything, and we can pick up with your. I mean, I really think it's again, I'm very grateful to you for offering that as an opening for your own engagement. So
Trying to figure out where to even start.
So yeah, so next week we can pick up where we left off.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, take care, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for coming, Grace.
Well, thank you all. Have a good weekend.
See you.